I stood on my front lawn staring at my clothes scattered across the grass. The wind kept blowing my sweaters toward the street, while Riley and Mara slammed the front door behind them. Riley shouted through the glass, "You were just Dad's nurse, not his wife. Get out." His sister added, "This house belongs to our family. You are nothing to us." I felt the ground shift under me. This was the home I shared with their father, my husband, Grant Harwood. We built a life together for 10 years. But at that moment, they treated me like I never existed. They changed the locks while I begged them to let me get my things. They ignored every word. That night, I sat in my car in the driveway, with my knees pulled to my chest. I cried until my throat hurt, and I felt too weak to drive. I reached into the pocket of Grant's old jacket for comfort and felt something stiff inside. It was a folded note in his handwriting. The message said, "Use the key I gave you 10 years ago. Go to the address. Go alone." Those words hit me like a bolt of lightning. I did not know what he meant, but something deep inside me told me my life was about to change. My name is Lena Harwood. I am 60 years old, and before that terrible night, I believed my life was finally steady. I grew up in a small Oregon town, where my mother Marilyn taught me to be gentle and patient, and my father Walter showed me the value of honest work. I spent most of my adult life as a hospice nurse, caring for families during their hardest moments. I always gave everything to others, so love came late for me. I met Grant when I cared for his mother. He visited her every day, rain or shine, walking into the room with that warm firefighter confidence. He always asked about my day and listened like every word mattered. After his mother passed away, he kept in touch. He would say, "Lena, you carry the kind of heart people search for their whole lives." I fell for him slowly, and then all at once. Our marriage was simple and full of respect. We would drink coffee on the porch every morning, and he never ended a day without telling me he appreciated me. For our first anniversary, he gave me a small brass key on a chain. He smiled and said, "This is for someday. When someday comes, you'll know." But his children never accepted me. Riley was always tense around me. He once muttered, "Dad should be with someone his own age," even though I was only 8 years older than Grant. Mara was quieter, but sharper. She accused me of wanting money, even though she knew nothing about my life. Grant defended me, but the resentment in his children only grew stronger. When Grant got sick, I stayed by his side through every appointment, every medication, every long night when he struggled to sleep. The children visited only a few times, always suspicious, never gentle. When Grant passed away, I thought maybe grief would bring us together. Instead, they walked into my home as if they had the right to erase me. The night they threw my clothes onto the lawn, I felt completely alone. But the note I found in Grant's jacket reminded me of the man he was. He never acted without purpose. If he left me a message, he left me a path. I just had to follow it. If you want more powerful stories like this, make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I woke up in my car with my neck stiff and my eyes swollen from crying, and for a moment, I forgot where I was. The early morning light made everything look unfamiliar. My clothes were still scattered across the yard, damp from the night air. I felt a deep ache in my chest as I remembered how Riley and Mara had shut the door on me the night before. I had spent years trying to earn a place in their lives, or at the very least their respect, yet they looked at me as if I had stolen something from them. As I watched the sunlight hit the house Grant and I once shared, I felt both shame and disbelief. I had not taken anything from them, yet they treated me like a stranger trying to break in. I gathered what little I could and sat back in the driver's seat holding the note Grant had written. His handwriting alone made me want to cry again. It reminded me of all the letters he used to leave on the kitchen counter, saying simple things like, "Have a good shift," or "Pick your favorite dinner tonight." Those small gestures were the heart of our marriage. Now, the same handwriting was telling me to use a key I had never fully understood and visit an address I had never seen. Before I could think more about it, I saw Riley's car pull up behind mine. He stepped out with Mara right behind him. Riley crossed his arms and stared at me through the windshield with cold anger. When I opened my door, he said, "You need to leave. We are calling a locksmith to change the garage keypad. You don't live here," Mara added. Dad trusted the wrong person. We're not letting you touch anything inside. My voice cracked as I told them the house was also mine, that Grant and I built it together. Riley stepped closer until I had to lean back. He said, "No court will believe you. You were a caretaker, not a partner. You should be grateful you stayed here this long." His words hit me harder than the night before because he said them so calmly, as if they were simple facts. I tried to tell them again that I had personal items inside, things Grant had given me, things that belonged to me alone, but Mara shook her head and said, "Anything Dad gave you is ours now. Stop pretending you mattered to him more than us." I felt something crack inside me, not anger, but a deep sadness mixed with shame. I backed away, not because they were right, but because I knew they would not listen. I was tired, broken, and afraid of what they might do if I pushed any harder. I got into my car, locked the doors, and forced myself to breathe slowly so I would not burst into tears again. Watching them walk back into the house without looking at me made me feel invisible, as if I had never been part of Grant's life. I pressed the note to my chest and tried to calm my shaking hands. If Grant had left me a message before he died, it meant he knew something like this could happen. He knew his children better than I did. He knew the resentment they carried long before I realized how deep it went. I thought back to the last night we spent together. He was weak, but his eyes were clear when he held my hand and said, "You'll be all right, Lena. I promise you that." At the time, I thought he was simply trying to comfort me. Now I understood he had been planning something. The note in my hand was not random. The key he gave me 10 years earlier had a purpose. He always told me, "One day you'll know why you need this." That day had come sooner than either of us wanted, but I trusted him. I trusted his judgment more than anyone's. I started the car and pulled away from the curb with a heavy heart. Leaving that driveway felt like letting go of my old life, but staying there meant letting Riley and Mara crush what little strength I had left. As I drove toward the main road, I promised myself I would follow the address Grant left for me, not because I understood it, but because he believed I would need it. That belief alone was enough to get me through that painful morning. Whatever waited for me at the end of that message was the only thing I had left. I drove slowly away from the house, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My whole body felt heavy, like I was carrying years of pain and confusion on my back, but the note in my lap kept pulling my thoughts forward. The words, "Use the key," played in my mind like a quiet drumbeat, steady and impossible to ignore. Grant never gave gifts without thought. Every anniversary, every small token, every word he left on the fridge meant something. I remembered the day he gave me the brass key. We were sitting at our favorite diner, and he slid a tiny box across the table with a proud smile. When I opened it and saw only a key on a chain, I began to laugh, thinking it was some kind of inside joke. Grant gently squeezed my hand and said, "This is for later. When later comes, you'll understand." For years, I wore the key on my necklace, then tucked it into a jewelry box when the chain broke. Now it sat in my pocket with the warmth of a living memory. As I followed the highway toward the address on the note, I realized I had no idea what I was heading toward. The town grew smaller behind me, and the road slowly turned into quiet, rural stretches lined with trees and fields. I drove past old barns, worn fences, and small signs pointing to places I had never visited, even though I had lived in that region my entire life. My heart raced with a mix of fear and hope. I felt like Grant was guiding me, telling me to trust him one last time. At one point, I pulled over because my hands were shaking too much. I sat there in the silence of an empty roadside, hearing only the hum of my engine and the rapid beat of my heart. I took out the note again and traced the letters of his handwriting with my fingertips. It reminded me of the way he wrote grocery lists, always neat and steady, as if he wanted things to be easy on me. It hurt, knowing he wrote this when he must have been in pain. That thought pushed me to keep going. I started the car again and followed the final miles until I reached a long gravel driveway hidden behind a cluster of tall pine trees. The driveway was easy to miss, almost invisible if you were not looking for it. I turned in slowly, hearing the crunch of stones under my tires. After a few yards, I saw a large iron gate barring the path. Hanging from it was a simple metal lock, old and scratched, but sturdy. My breath caught in my throat when I realized the shape matched the brass key in my pocket. I stepped out of the car, and the cold air hit my skin, waking me up fully. My hands trembled as I pulled out the key and held it up to the lock. The moment felt unreal. I whispered, "Grant, what were you trying to show me?" My voice cracked in the quiet of the forest. The key slid into the lock as if it belonged there, and with a firm turn, it clicked open. I pushed the gate, and it creaked slowly, revealing a long path leading deeper into the trees. My heart pounded as I got back in the car and drove through, watching the gate swing shut behind me. I followed the path until I saw a cabin come into view at the end of the drive. It was larger than a regular cabin, more like a small lodge with dark wood walls, a stone chimney, and a wraparound porch. It stood strong and untouched, like it had been waiting for someone. My breath caught again, because something about it felt familiar, even though I had never seen it before. I stepped out of the car and felt the ground beneath my feet steady me in a way I hadn't felt since Grant's passing. The air smelled like pine and morning dew, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt calm. I walked up the steps and stood at the front door. There was no lockbox, no spare key under a mat, nothing except a small keyhole that looked worn from years of use. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the brass key again, suddenly remembering the way Grant had kissed my forehead the day he gave it to me. My hands shook as I placed the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. I turned it slowly, and the sound of the lock opening felt like a whisper from him saying, "You made it." My heart swelled as I pushed the door open, not knowing what waited on the other side, but trusting that whatever it was, Grant meant it to protect me. That single decision to follow his message became the moment I stepped out of fear and into the truth he had left behind. When the door opened, the smell of warm cedar and old books washed over me, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. I stepped inside, slowly, afraid that moving too fast would break the moment or wake me from what felt like a dream. My eyes adjusted to the soft morning light pouring through the windows, and I saw a room that looked lived in but untouched, as if someone had prepared it carefully and kept it waiting. A hand-woven quilt lay across a couch, the kind of quilt my mother Marilyn used to make when I was young. On the opposite wall, shelves were filled with books I loved, some that I had mentioned to Grant years ago in passing, titles I never thought he remembered. I reached out and touched one, feeling the weight of the gesture. Every small detail told me Grant had been thinking of me far more deeply than I ever realized. My legs felt weak, and I lowered myself to my knees, overwhelmed by the understanding that this place had been created for me. I whispered his name because saying it gently made the room feel full again. As I wiped my face, I noticed a wooden table near the back of the room with a thick envelope resting neatly in the center. My name was written on the front in Grant's handwriting. My heart pounded against my ribs as I picked it up, afraid of what I might find, yet desperate to know the truth he wanted me to have. Inside were several documents, including a deed. My hands shook as I read it. The cabin, the surrounding land, every part of this place was listed under my name and had been for years. Grant had signed the papers long before his illness. I sat down slowly, staring at the signature that proved he had planned all of this with intention and love. He had known something like this might happen with Riley and Mara, and instead of putting me in the middle of a fight, he built a way for me to live without fear. As I continued to look through the envelope, I found a small flash drive taped to a card that read, "For when you are ready." I searched the cabin for anything that might play the drive, and in a desk drawer I found a small laptop wrapped carefully in a cloth. My hands trembled as I powered it on. When the screen lit up, a video file appeared with my name on it. My breath caught as I clicked it. Grant's face appeared on the screen, weaker than I remembered, but still carrying that steady warmth I fell in love with. He looked directly into the camera and smiled in a soft, tired way. "Lena, if you're watching this, it means I didn't get to tell you everything in person," he began. Hearing his voice again sent a painful rush through my chest. He continued, I know my children never understood you. They never saw how much you cared for me. I tried to teach them kindness, but some lessons come too late." He paused to breathe, his shoulders rising with effort, and my heart cracked, knowing he recorded this during a difficult phase of his illness. "You gave me the kind of love I thought I would never find again," he said. "You made my last years the happiest ones I ever lived. I never wanted you to worry about a roof over your head or whether you belonged." He looked off camera for a moment, then back again, and his voice grew firmer. "This cabin is yours. I bought this land before we married because I wanted a place where we could escape the world when life felt too heavy. When I saw the way Riley and Mara looked at you, I realized I needed to protect your future. I knew they might turn their anger toward you once I was gone. I hate that I was right. If you are watching this now," my eyes blurred with tears as he continued, "please remember something. Love makes a person responsible for more than words. It makes us responsible for care, for safety, for peace. This cabin is my way of giving you peace. No one can take it from you." He smiled again, weaker this time. "I hope you fill this place with laughter and rest. I hope you live the life you gave me. And Lena, I need you to promise me one thing. Do not let anyone convince you that you were anything less than my wife, my partner, and my..." He ended the message with 3 quiet words that felt like they reached straight into my heart. "Live for you." The video faded to black. I sat in silence, letting his voice settle into the deepest part of me. Every wound left by Riley and Mara felt smaller compared to the love Grant had poured into this place. He had not only believed in me, he had built a future for me long before I knew I would need one. As I looked around the cabin again, it no longer felt like a mystery. It felt like a promise fulfilled. My hands rested on the desk, and for the first time since his passing, I felt steady. Grant had taken care of me with his last act of love, and now the truth was clear. I was never alone, and I never would be, not in the home he created with his heart. In the days after watching Grant's video, I walked through the cabin with a new sense of purpose, touching the furniture, running my fingers across the bookshelves, and opening drawers filled with small items he must have placed there with care. Every corner of the place held something that reminded me of our life together, and each reminder helped me slowly piece myself back together. I slept soundly for the first time in weeks, surrounded by the quiet safety Grant had planned for me. When I woke up, I brewed coffee in the small kitchen, sat on the porch, and watched the morning light filter through the trees. I felt something I had not felt since he passed away. I felt protected. The next step, though, was not emotional, but practical. I needed to speak to a lawyer, and I needed to do it soon. The cabin's deed was in my name, but I had no idea what else Grant had prepared. The attorney listened carefully, reviewed every document Grant left behind, and told me something that made my entire body relax with relief. Grant had set up a private trust years earlier, separate from anything involving his children, and he had made me the sole beneficiary. Riley and Mara had no legal claim to the cabin or any of the funds Grant put aside for me. The lawyer said, "Your husband made sure you were safe. He planned this with clarity." Hearing that brought tears to my eyes because it proved how deeply he had thought about my future, even when his own time was running short. When I drove back to the cabin, the weight that had pressed on my shoulders for so long felt lighter. I parked outside the porch and sat there for a moment, thinking about everything Grant had done. His thoughtfulness stretched far beyond what I ever expected. I knew he loved me, but the scale of his care left me speechless. Over the next month, I settled into the cabin and began to rebuild my life from the ground up. I brought a few belongings from a friend's home, where I had temporarily stored them, bought new clothes, and created a quiet routine. I read on the porch every afternoon. I cooked simple meals in the kitchen. I planted a few flowers outside the cabin window because Grant always said I had a calming way of tending to growing things. Each day was still touched with sadness, but it was gentle sadness, the kind that softened instead of crushed. Then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was Riley. He wrote, "We need to talk about Dad's property. We heard you ran off with something that belongs to us." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a familiar sting, but this time, the hurt did not take over. I replied with a single sentence. Everything Dad left to me was legal and intentional. A few hours later, Mara called. Her voice was sharp at first, filled with the same bitterness I had always heard from her. "Why would Dad leave anything to you and not his real family?" she snapped. Her words might have once shattered me, but now they only revealed how little she understood her father. I answered calmly, "Your father loved all of us, but he also knew what each of us needed. He made sure you were taken care of years ago. This cabin was his gift to me. He trusted me, and I will honor that." My voice stayed steady, even when silence from her side stretched long. Mara finally muttered something under her breath and ended the call. I did not feel angry. I felt free. I walked outside and looked at the land around me, the tall trees swaying in the breeze, and I knew I had made it to the place Grant wanted me to find. A few weeks later, I created a small garden behind the cabin. I placed a wooden bench there and planted roses, lavender, and white lilies. I called it Grant's Garden because it felt like the right way to keep his presence close. On warm evenings, I sit there and talk to him, not out loud, but in the way people speak to the memories they love. I tell him about the peace he gave me, and I tell him I am trying my best to live the life he hoped I would. I have learned that family is not always defined by blood. Sometimes it is defined by loyalty, kindness, and the quiet choices we make for the people we love. Grant's final gift gave me a future without fear, and the strength he believed I carried finally started to grow inside me. I no longer think of myself as the woman who was pushed out of her home. I think of myself as the woman he chose to protect, the woman he trusted, and the woman who survived heartbreak and found a place built with love. From this cabin, I am starting again with steady hands and a full heart. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to my channel and comment where you are watching from.